I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
There we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us today. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. A historic day is likely about to take place. Ahead of us, we're going to have for the fourth time, it looks like for the fourth time in American history, House Representatives will be impeaching sitting president of the United States. They'll be voting to impeach a sitting president. Now, yesterday I told you that it was likely, well, not likely. Yesterday I told you that there was one idea to impeach and not send the articles of impeachment to the Senate because they don't want all of their dirty laundry. Again, in hindsight, this would very likely be a trial of the Democrats because the Republicans are in control. Yesterday, though, Mitch McConnell saying that they're going to vote to dismiss the impeachment, and it will largely be on partisan lines. And he rejected, I was so happy that Mitch McConnell rejected Chuck Schumer's request to try to appear reasonable, to try to essentially go on another fact-finding mission, to essentially amend the sloppy work that Adam Schiff did. And Adam Schiff, of course, is totally discredited because he's a liar. I think it is evident now, more than ever, that this was all a stalling tactic because of investigations into the deep state and global corruption. Think Panama Papers, but on steroids. I think that's what we're on the precipice of. And I'm not worried. I'm just telling you, I haven't been worried for a very long time. Those of you, now, do I get upset? Do I get angry? Do the Democrats make me crazy because over the last 2 years they're reminding us of just how morally debunked, debased, how crazy, how totally unhinged they are now that they've gotten a little bit of power back in the House of Representatives? I mean, this, if anything, it will go down. If Donald Trump wins in 2020, which I think it's likely, they will say it was because the Democrats took back the House in 2018 and reminded the country just how nuts they are. That and the mainstream media, they were exposed to being complete liars about Trump-Russia collusion, which there was none, and now we know what the FBI's done, and this is going to slowly but surely, hear me, I really believe this will slowly but surely wake even more Americans up to what's been going on. I know that's maybe a tinge of optimism that you're not used to hearing, but I've said this before. I'm telling you, first of all, Donald Trump himself turned electoral politics on its head. I was not a Trump supporter in the primaries. I voted for him in the presidential election, but I was a Rand Paul guy first and a Ted Cruz guy. This is just me personally. And talk radio hosts were taken aback. Talk radio host who, for a decade under the Obama administration, or 8 years, had been preaching limited constitutional government, esoteric ideas that we've lost. Donald Trump comes along and takes a populist message, takes a drain the swamp message, but also picks one issue like the border or one issue like trade and NAFTA, and he wins. And it defied even the parameters that those of us on the right had set for what's an acceptable candidate. And I was totally taken aback and wrong by it. I learned something then, and what I learned was there is something unique about President Donald Trump and this particular time in history, again, this is just my personal opinion. You can disagree with me, I understand. But ever since he's been elected, I have seen the allergic reaction, the immune system in Washington, D.C. kick in. I have seen them react in a way that I've never seen before. It is clear he is an agent of change. It is clear he is more than an irritant. He is onto something huge. He's actually trying to end the corruption in Washington, D.C. and in the White House. I think he's making a lot of headway in doing that. And every net, hear me, this is just my observation, every net, the press, the deep state, the Democrats, even his own party, sets for him, they fall into themselves. They are laying traps for him that then they fall into. And I have seen it over the last 3 years. It's happened over and over and over again. This will be a historic day. I expect them to have the votes to impeach the president. It will move to the Senate. Let's hope Mitch McConnell does what he says he's going to do. Let's hope they're just going to take it up, vote to dismiss it, and be done with it, and let's get on to 2020. Because people are going to, now some of you may say, no, we need to have the trial. We need to flesh it out. We need to put the Democrats on trial. No. That's for John Durham to do. That's for John Durham to do. And if this impeachment were to go to a big trial, it would delay what I believe are coming indictments at this point. And maybe that was the point of this all along. That didn't stop the President of the United States, though. None of this has stopped the President of the United States. He penned a scathing letter, and for the record, you need to read it. I'm going to read it right now. This letter is a historic, you talk about a historic day of the fourth president to be impeached. This letter is historic in its rebuke. And I'm glad he wrote it. I'm glad he put this out there. And he even mentioned, 100 years later, I want people to know the truth about what happened. President Donald Trump wrote this to Nancy Pelosi. I write to express my strongest and most powerful protest against the partisan impeachment crusade being pursued by the Democrats in the House of Representatives. This impeachment represents an unprecedented and unconstitutional abuse of power by Democrat lawmakers, unequaled in nearly 2.5 centuries of American legislative history. The articles of impeachment introduced by the House Judiciary Committee are not recognizable under any standard of constitutional theory, interpretation, or jurisprudence. They include no crimes, no misdemeanors, and no offenses whatsoever. You have cheapened the importance of the very ugly word impeachment. By proceeding with your invalid impeachment, you are violating your oaths of office, you are breaking your allegiance to the Constitution, and you are declaring open war on American democracy. You dare to invoke the Founding Fathers in pursuit of this election nullification scheme? Yet your spiteful actions display unfettered contempt for America's founding, and your egregious conduct threatens to destroy that which our founders pledged their very lives to build. Even worse than offending the Founding Fathers, you're offending Americans of faith by continually saying, I pray for the president, when you know this statement is not true, unless it's meant in a negative way. It's a terrible thing you're doing, but you will have to live with it, not I. President Trump goes on. Your first claim, abuse of power, is a completely disingenuous, meritless, and baseless invention of your imagination. You know that I had a totally innocent conversation with the president of Ukraine. I then had a second conversation that has been misquoted, mischaracterized, and fraudulently misrepresented. Fortunately, there was a transcript of the conversation taken, and you know from the transcript, which was immediately made available, that the paragraph in question was perfect. I said to President Zelensky, I would like for you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I said do us a favor, not me, and our country, not a campaign. I then mentioned the Attorney General of the United States. Every time I talk with the foreign leader, I put America's interests first, just as I did with President Zelensky. You are turning a policy disagreement between two branches of government into an impeachable offense. It is no more legitimate than the executive branch charging members of Congress with crimes for the lawful exercise of legislative power. You know full well that Vice President Biden used his office and $1 billion of U.S. aid money to coerce Ukraine into firing the prosecutor who was digging into the company paying his son millions of dollars. You know this because Biden bragged about it on video. Biden openly stated, quote, "I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I looked at him and said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bee, he got fired," end quote. Even Joe Biden admitted just days ago in an interview with NPR that it looked bad. Now you're trying to impeach me by falsely accusing me of doing what Joe Biden has admitted he actually did? President Zelensky has repeatedly declared that I did nothing wrong and that there was no pressure. He further emphasized that it was a good phone call and I don't feel pressure, and explicitly stressed that nobody pushed me. The Ukrainian foreign minister stated very clearly, "I have never seen a direct link between investigations and security assistance." He also said there was no pressure. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, a supporter of Ukraine, who met privately with President Zelensky, has said at no time during this meeting was there any mention by Zelensky or any Ukrainian that they were feeling pressure to do anything in return for military aid. Many meetings have been held between representatives of Ukraine and our country. Never once did Ukraine complain about pressure being applied, not once. Ambassador Sondland testified that I told him, quote, "No quid pro quo. I want nothing. I want nothing. I want President Zelensky to do the right thing, do what he ran on," end quote. The second claim President Trump goes on in his letter to Nancy Pelosi, the so-called obstruction of Congress is preposterous and dangerous. House Democrats are trying to impeach the duly elected President of the United States for asserting constitutionally based privileges that have been asserted on a bipartisan basis by administrations of both political parties throughout our nation's history. Under that standard, every American president would have been impeached many times over. As liberal law professor Jonathan Turley warned when addressing congressional Democrats, I can't emphasize this enough. If you impeach a president, if you make a high crime and misdemeanor out of going to the courts, it is an abuse of power. It's your abuse of power. You're doing precisely what you're criticizing the president for doing. Every one of you, everyone, you included, knows what is really happening. Your chosen candidate lost the 2016 election in an electoral college landslide, 306 to 227, and you and your party have never recovered from this defeat. You have devoted a full-fledged case of what many in the media call Trump derangement syndrome, and sadly you will never get over it. You are unwilling and unable to accept the verdict issued at the ballot box during the great election of 2016. You have spent 3 straight years attempting to overturn the will of the American people and nullify their votes. You view democracy as your enemy. Wow, he pulls no punches here. Speaker Pelosi, you admitted just last week at a public forum that your party's impeachment effort has been going on for 2.5 years, long before you ever heard about the phone call with Ukraine. 19 minutes after I took the oath of office, the Washington Post published a headline, "The campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." Less than 3 months after my inauguration, Representative Maxine Waters stated, "I'm going to fight every day until he's impeached." House Democrats introduced the first impeachment resolution against me within months of my inauguration for what will be regarded as one of the country's best decisions. The firing of James Comey, see Inspector General's report, who the world now knows is one of the dirtiest cops our nation has ever seen. A ranting and raving Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, declared just hours after she was sworn into office, we're going to go in there and we're going to impeach the mother expletive. Representative Al Green said in May, "I'm concerned that if we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected." Again, you and your allies said and did all of these things long before you ever heard of President Zelensky or anything related to Ukraine. As you know very well, this impeachment drive has nothing to do with Ukraine or the totally appropriate conversation I had with its new president. It only has to do with your attempt to undo the election of 2016 and steal the election of 2020. Congressman Adam Schiff cheated and lied all the way up to the present day, even goes so far as to fraudulently make up out of thin air my conversation with President Zelensky of Ukraine and read this fantasy language to Congress as though it were said by me. His shameless lies and deceptions dating all the way back to the Russia hoax is one of the main reasons we are here today. You and your party are desperate to distract from America's extraordinary economy, incredible jobs boom, record stock market, soaring confidence, and flourishing citizens. Your party simply cannot compete with our record of 7 million new jobs, the lowest ever unemployment for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, a rebuilt military, a completely reformed VA with choice and accountability for our great veterans, more than 170 new federal judges and 2 Supreme Court justices, historic tax and regulation cuts, the elimination of individual mandate, the first decline in prescription drug prices in half a century, the first new branch of the United States military since 1947, the Space Force, strong protection of the Second Amendment, and he just goes on, folks, to list his resume, including moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, something that both parties have said they would do for decades, and he actually did it. President Trump goes on, there is nothing I would rather do than to stop referring to your party as the Do-Nothing Democrats. Unfortunately, I don't know that you will ever give me a chance to do so. After 3 years of unfair and unwarranted investigations, $45 million spent, 18 angry Democrat prosecutors, the entire force of the FBI, headed by leadership now proven to be totally incompetent and corrupt, you have found nothing. Few people in high position could have endured or passed this test. You do not know, nor do you care, the great damage and hurt you've inflicted upon wonderful and loving members of my family. You conducted a fake investigation upon the democratically elected President of the United States, and you are doing it yet again. There are not many people who could have taken the punishment inflicted during this period of time, and yet done so much for the success of America and its citizens. But instead of putting our country first, you have decided to disgrace our country still further. You completely failed with the Mueller report because there was nothing to find. You decided to take the next hoax that came along, the phone call with Ukraine, even though it was a perfect call. And by the way, when I speak to foreign countries, there are many people, with permission, listening to the call on both sides of the conversation. You are the one interfering in America's elections. You are the ones subverting America's democracy. You are the ones obstructing justice. You are the ones bringing pain and suffering to our republic for your own selfish, personal, political, and partisan gain. Before this impeachment hoax, it was the Russian witch hunt. Against all evidence and regardless of the truth, you and your deputies claim that my campaign colluded with the Russians. A grave and malicious and slanderous lie, a falsehood like no other. You forced our nation through turmoil and torment over a wholly fabricated story illegally purchased from a foreign spy by Hillary Clinton and the DNC in order to assault our democracy. Yet when the monstrous lie was debunked and this Democrat conspiracy dissolved into dust, you did not apologize. You did not recant. You did not ask to be forgiven. You showed no remorse, no capacity for self-reflection. Instead, you pursued your next libelous and vicious crusade. You engineered an attempt to frame and defame an innocent person. All of this was motivated by personal political calculation. Your speakership and your party are held hostage by your most deranged and radical representatives of the far left. Each one of your members lives in fear of a socialist primary challenger. This is what is driving impeachment. Look at Congressman Nadler's challenger. Look at yourself and others. Do not take our country down with your party. If you truly cared about freedom and liberty for our nation, then you would be devoting your vast investigative resources to exposing the full truth concerning the FBI's horrifying abuses of power before, during, and after the 2016 election, including the use of spies against my campaign, the submission of false evidence to a FISA court, and the concealment of exculpatory evidence in order to frame the innocent. The FBI has great and honorable people, but the leadership was inept and corrupt. I would think that you would personally be appalled by these revelations, because in your press conference, the day you announced impeachment, you tied the impeachment effort directly to the completely discredited Russia hoax, declaring twice that, quote, all roads lead to Putin, when you know that is an abject lie. I have been far tougher on Russia than President Obama ever even thought to be. We've got to go to break, but obviously this letter goes on. Obviously it pulls no punches. I wanted to spend some time on it because this is a historic day. And I've got this feeling, regardless, what you ever wonder if people, when you lay that out, and this is a truthful recount of what we have been through as a country, you have to wonder, and I'm no perfect person, and I mean, there is no perfect person, but I feel like we're going to discover some of these leaders are continuously thinking of evil, are continuously consumed with it. When you have one side 180 degrees away from the other on literally every issue, you start to realize real quick that there's in some of these issues, it's not a gray issue. That one side is right and one side is going to be wrong. We got to take a break. Let me know what you think. Facebook.com/ConduitNews, ConduitNews.com, and the YouTube channel as well. Sound off. We'll be back in just a moment. Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic,
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
The president concludes this right here. I have no doubt the American people will hold you and the Democrats fully responsible in the upcoming 2020 election. They will not soon forgive your perversion of justice and abuse of power. 100 years from now, when people look back at this affair, I want them to understand it and learn from it so it can never happen to another president again. If you haven't read the letter, folks, you need to read the whole thing for yourself. It is extremely powerful. Coming up on the program at the top of the next hour, State Representative Marcus Richmond will be with us. Always great to talk to him. He's the majority leader of the Arkansas House of Representatives. Also, 7:33, we'll be talking with policy analysts from the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. I covered part of what Mr. Jacob Bundrick said on Monday in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette article about this audit to study economic development incentives. We'll be talking with Jacob about that coming up at 7:33. You don't want to miss it. Also, tomorrow, Patrick Deakins is on the program, Washington County JP. Going to talk some local jail issues. And we have the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, back with us, David Rubin. We're going to talk a little global politics and what does Brexit mean now that it looks like it's actually going to happen. So we're going to all that coming up the rest of the week. All right. When we come back, let's get into some more of this stuff. Did you hear? So yesterday I told you how Max Brantley of the Arkansas Times weighed in on the Hallmark situation, your Hallmark Christmas movies. Well, so has John Brummett now of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. He's now weighed in on this. So what do these two liberal progressive guys have to say about Hallmark? Well, of course, they think it was wrong of this mom's group that likes to watch Hallmark Channel with their kids. They think it was pretty much wrong and of them to say, hey, we don't want to see two women kissing at the altar when getting married, having to explain that to our children. It's all just, they all ignore what the left does all the time, and the right does it one time, and it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that. Back in a minute.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And military tools, as well as propaganda, to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown ninefold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong Province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
How many of you on the night of the 2016 election, how many of you stayed up the whole time until President Trump took the stage to accept the victory? That Joe did, I did. I'm sure many of you out there listening to this program that did. When he took the stage, and this is a historic day. They're about to impeach the President of the United States. Send it to the Senate. Senate's probably going to dismiss it. How many of you thought, though, when it happened, when he took the stage and he actually, you realized, this is the guy. He's actually done it. The say what you want, anti-establishment candidate, the guy who was a part of the system, not just a part of donating to these politicians to get what he wanted, but he also was approved by the Hollywood types, right? Being on the TV, being on The Apprentice, but he basically threw all of that away, to stand up for, because he realized that like the middle class was being fleeced and the country in general was in decline. This guy takes the stage, and I don't know about you, but I remember what I was thinking. They're not going to let this last long. That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I was amazed. I was ecstatic. I was praising God that Hillary Clinton was not going to be in the White House. But I also was like, they're not going to let this stand for long. They can't afford. I mean, this was like the equivalent of. It was the equivalent of. You ever see that movie, The Hunger Games, Joe? when at the end of the first one, when she exposes, doesn't she expose the government for being a bunch of frauds or whatever at the very end or something? She survives, but doesn't. There's only supposed to be one survivor, and she figures out a way for both of them to survive, or something, or whatever happened. Anyway, it was a massive exposing that the people who are supposed to be in control aren't actually in control. They're inept, and that's exactly what the president. That's what the election of Donald Trump was.
Yeah, because at the end of the first one, there's supposed to be one winner. There's not supposed to be two.
And there was two.
She manipulates the system by basically saying, "Oh, we'll kill ourselves. We'll just be." We'll end it. We'll both end it right here, right now, and
then there won't be any winner.
And we have all the power then. And now we're going to show everyone that we truly have the power. Y'all have nothing.
Yes, that's what. So it was the people have the power, and that's what the American people showed when they elected Donald Trump. And I just remember thinking, this isn't going to last long. They're going to do something. And here we are in 2019, December 18th, a week before Christmas. And they're going to vote today to impeach this man. And it has been one scheme after another to try to take him down. And yet, can you imagine? I can't believe how the media is so irrelevant. And I only say that the mainstream media is irrelevant in a large part because his approval rating is still so high. And the support for impeachment is going down. How is that possible when the mainstream media is constantly reporting negatively about the president? The only conclusion is the people don't believe them or trust them anymore. Which is why you see Google, Facebook, and others ramping up their censorship, because they figured out people are bypassing the traditional media and talking heads, and they're talking to each other, and they're able to do that freely, and they're waking more people up, and that you got to squash that down. It is an interesting time we live in. It really is. I'll talk about FISA later. I want to get to this John Brumman article, but before I do, the House Democrats want to completely overhaul how the U.S. economy is measured, and it's part of a bigger effort to tackle inequality. That's right. It's about inequality, income inequality. It's nothing to do with hurting the message of gross domestic product increases. Good grief. So now they want to redefine what GDP is. So, the GDP last month was this much, but actual GDP, when you take into account income inequality, was actually this much. It was actually a retraction in GDP. These people are crazy. Marxist, socialist. They don't want economic freedom, I'll tell you that much. Okay, so John Brumman. Headline, Hallmark on backtracking. So John Brumman gives us this story today in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, this column where he talks about his experience watching Hallmark movies. I know you all have been wondering, what does John Brumman think about the Hallmark situation? At least Brumman did write about Asa in China, though. I will say, at least he wrote about it, even though he did it to excuse what the Bidens have been doing. By the way, I don't think that piece is going to age very well, John. I don't think your article on Asa is going to age very well. I don't think your article on Hunter and Joe Biden is going to age very well. Rudy Giuliani has now uncovered a lot. Matter of fact, the country of Latvia, which I don't even really, the last time I said the name of the country Latvia is when I was watching the Seinfeld episode where George converts to Latvian Orthodox. But apparently the nation of Latvia flagged a multi-million-dollar payment that went via Burisma in Ukraine to Latvia and was dispersed to Hunter Biden. Latvia flagged it because Burisma was under investigation by the Ukraine at the time. Yeah. I just don't think that John Brummett piece is going to age very well. That's all I'm saying. Hunter Biden and Joe Biden didn't do anything wrong, and neither did Asa and his son, because that's just nothing. Nothing to see here. It's just you gotta be an attorney, and you got to make a living. Essentially, that's the gist here. You got to make a living. It might not look good for Hunter Biden or Asa Hutchinson III to make money off of their dad's position in power, but hey, what are you going to do? You can't stop it. Just like we couldn't stop Jeremy Hutchinson from, being an attorney and a legislator at the same time. What are you going to do? You can't stop it. Actually, you can, because Jeremy Hutchinson is likely going to go to jail for what he did. So, John Brummett writes, let me skip down here. He talked about watching a Hallmark movie. Let's see. Quote, all the groovy gay ladies I know won't be watching your Christmas schlock. This is according to actress-comedian Sandra Bernard, who played one of the first bisexual characters on network television in Roseanne, openly addressing the Hallmark Company. Perhaps, John Brummett writes, you'll remember the fall and early winter of my discontent from Election Day 2016 through the holiday season. John Brummett's talking about back when Trump was elected, he had, I don't know, maybe a bout with depression. I don't know. The nation, a winter of discontent, if you will. He writes, the nation had elected preposterously as president a mean-spirited, megalomaniacal madman who had bitterly attacked, among others, my profession, the media. He still continues to do that, by the way. I wandered about, as if in a daze, finding odd solace or vapid escape in formulaic Christmas movies on a television network called Hallmark. And so he goes and he talks about, how this is about people falling in love on the holidays. Now, he did say that he noticed a lack of diversity when he watched. Either I watched the same movie over and over, or I watched several movies that told the same story with the same kind of characters. Yeah, that's what the Hallmark movies are. There's a great demographic for them. We've talked about it. He goes on, I noticed there was not much diversity from white, straight-sexed characters in these movies. I made a note to worry about that later when I got feeling better. So John Brummett is saying in 2016 he noticed that the Hallmark Christmas movies are not servicing, they're not representing the LGBT, RSTLNE, would you like to buy a vowel, the alphabet people, that they were being underrepresented, that they were not being represented at all. By the way, this is a guy who has defended Asa Hutchinson in his columns countless times, by the way. So he noticed that there wasn't enough diversity. Then we skip down here, and he tells you what the current news is. A right-wing professed Christian conservative outfit calling itself 1 Million Moms, but consisting only of thousands fired off a complaint to the home office of Hallmark, the Crown Media Family Networks. The group said it depended on Hallmark for Christian fare, especially during the Christmas season, and was deeply offended that such a trusted entertainment-providing friend would betray them and force them to have to try to explain such an alien and vile scene to their children. That would be the Zola commercial showing two women getting married and kissing. Hallmark executives, John Brummett writes, put their heads together and decided to run no more commercials with same-sex couples. Now let me stop here. And that's when the LGBT, RSTLNE, would you like to buy Val, mafia online, their heads exploded. They just couldn't believe that Hallmark would do this. Now, this is already in the wake of, I have to remind you, this is in the wake, we've already had people asking Hallmark why they're not making movies with gay characters, like a gay central love scene. And the Hallmark person's like, yeah, we're open to all relationships. Sure, we'll consider it. We all know what's coming. So does John Brummett. He even says so. He says, One of these days, and it might be a few years, Hallmark will air a film with a gay romance element. Then, a few years after that, it will air a film with a same-sex central story leading to a show of affection and wedlock. Then, a few years after that, people who don't want to look at that sort of thing or for their children to look at it will learn to use differently the energy they once would have expended to write a letter seeking to impose their own values. So, I mean, gosh, John Brummett is in a liberal progressive bubble. I don't think he sees what the progressive left has done, what they are doing. And you have this group, Million Moms, that feels the need to stand up because there is nothing else to do besides stand up, because that's what the other side is doing all the time. You have the LGBT group GLAAD that wants 25% by 2025. They want 25% of all fictional characters to represent somebody in the LGBTQ community. 25% of all characters they want to be gay or whatever in their movies. When we're talking about 5% of the population, something is very weird. To say that there's not an agenda is to just deny a self-evident truth in reality. And to be surprised that there's a counter movement to try to say, hey, hang on, wait a second. Yeah, I mean, John Brummett is partially right here. You can just change the channel. You can just choose not to watch. Whatever. Yeah, you can. But the fact is, this was something that was, becoming a family tradition, watching these Hallmark movies and how campy they all are. But it was a way to put something on the TV that you just, you don't have to worry about having awkward conversations with your friends. You don't have to worry about that. I'm sorry, with your awkward conversations with your children is what I meant to say. Not anymore. Not anymore, you don't. Let the awkward conversations ensue. And not even awkward, just maybe you're not ready to talk about that. Maybe you don't want to worry about it. I mean, it's part of the decaying of the culture. There's no question. And it's also part of the politically incorrect course that we are on, this collision where you say what you want to. There are people in this country that have what I would describe is a biblical worldview, okay? They see all of the Bible as truth. So it's a biblical worldview. And there are elements in that biblical worldview that are very offensive to American culture. Not the love your neighbor as yourself trope, but the other things about morality, that, what's right, what's wrong, that sort of thing. The homosexual lifestyle versus the traditional lifestyle, the biblical prescription. I mean, and that's what we're talking about here. So we're on this collision course where, why was this channel so popular? Why is it so popular? Why are these movies so popular? Because there's a lot of people in flyover country that appreciate wholesome content. Are you saying being gay is not wholesome? I'm saying there are obviously a lot of people that believe that. And I know what the Bible says about it. It says that it's wrong. So it just is what it is. And this is where we are today. And from my standpoint, when I first saw this story, and I've covered it now, this is, day 3, and the only reason I'm covering it now is just because Max Brantley wrote about it, and now John Brummett writes about it, and these are Arkansas columnists or journalists. When I first saw this story, I knew what was going to happen. Here's something that's just promoting traditional heterosexual relationships, and the LGBT crowd sees that and sees how everybody's watching it and consuming it, and they feel left out because they want to be heartily approved of, and now they're going to ruin it. Now they're coming for it. It's not going to be the same. John Brummett says someday, no, next year there will be a movie, in my opinion. I bet you there will be a movie with a same-sex couple in it next year. And we'll see what happens. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. Call or text. Also, sound off, facebook.com/Conduit News. We're going to take a quick break. Be right back in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Lee to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Lee. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill.
Money, power, prestige, essence, 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 ace. Available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection. The fragrance of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal. Deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Communist. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Want to remind everybody we got big changes coming to Conduit News coming up at the first of the year, January 2nd. We're moving away from radio, going all digital. We're going to have a new website, going to have a new look, new digs, if you will, better quality, everything, and going to reach even more people. And just wait till you see it. If those of you out there listening to radio, we really appreciate it, but you're going to need to migrate over. You're going to need to sign up for the newsletter. You're going to need to go to conduitnews.com or like us on Facebook or subscribe to us on YouTube in order to stay updated about what's coming. So do that now while you're thinking about it. And because we don't want you to, tune in on January 2nd and then be like, what happened? So tell your friends. It's going to be big, folks. It's going to be big. I'm really excited about it. The Washington Examiner, Jerry Dunleavy. Headline, Scratching the Surface. Education Department uncovers $1.3 billion in foreign university funding. My first thought is, how much foreign funding are Arkansas universities taking or have taken? An Education Department investigation revealed universities failed to report more than $1 billion in foreign funding, which officials believe is only a sliver of the unreported overseas donations flowing into our college campuses. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos told the Washington Examiner she had launched a preliminary investigation into 6 universities, but already turned up an alarming $1.3 billion in foreign funding over the past 7 years from nations such as, wait for it, China, Russia, and Qatar, that the schools hadn't told the federal government about, despite their legal requirement to do so. It's already a reporting requirement for schools to report all foreign contributions. From my perspective, it's a simple requirement. Report all foreign money you get. We're going to continue to raise the flag on this, and we think, just given what we've seen, is just scratching the surface. There's a lot there that's going undetected. Again, I wonder if there's any Arkansas universities that haven't reported getting money from the Communist Chinese. Or the Russians, for that matter. We're raising the issue and letting schools know that we're going to be paying attention in ways that hasn't happened before. In a 7-page letter to the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, the Education Department said the 6 investigations, still in their early stages, have revealed what Acting General Counsel Reed Rubenstein called disturbing facts. Rubenstein did not name the universities associated with each finding, citing the department's general policy not to comment on the status of or results of current investigations. But the universities under review are Georgetown, Texas A&M, Cornell, Rutgers, and the University of Maryland, and the Massachusetts Institute for Technology. Ooh, gosh. MIT? They taking Chinese money and not telling people about it? That's a big one. That's a big no-no. MIT? Good grief. This article from the Washington Examiner goes on to say China's secretive influence on campus figured most prominently, meaning they're the biggest offender. One university received research funding from a Chinese multinational conglomerate to develop new algorithms and advance biometric security techniques for crowd surveillance capabilities. That's right, just keep working on that technology that's going to enslave us all. Founders, we got the future founders of Skynet somewhere out there in the world right now. You can do it. You can enslave the human race. Just keep taking that Chinese communist money. In the meantime, Arkansas just can't wait to get jobs. We can't wait for the Chinese government to build their giant Trojan horse and leave it on our doorstep, where we will gladly wheel it in, thinking that it's some gift that the Chinese just decided to come here and bestow on us, all of these factories and jobs. And meanwhile, in the middle of the night, well, you know the story of Troy. Telephone number 870-275-9799. Coming up, State Representative Marcus Richmond is on the program. We're going to be talking with him. It's always great to talk to him. Matter of fact, I want to talk about a couple things. Number one, his comments in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette about the car wash situation, car wash tax causing a lot of confusion. We want to talk to him about that. And, this is primary season. He's got a Republican primary opponent, and so we'll talk to him about how his race is going. And we'll have that and the UCA, Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, Jacob Bundrick will be back with us coming up at 7:33. So we got a full hour of guests for you. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
In South Arkansas,
the Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Lee and I met yesterday. Chairman Lee indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leaders stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea, today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, say welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us today. This is hour number 2. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. So glad that you're with us. Okay, so we have with us on the line, we got State Representative Marcus Richmond is with us. Marcus, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's always great to talk to you, sir. Also, you are the majority leader of the Arkansas House of Representatives. So, first of all, you're excited for the holidays, right? You're excited for Christmas.
Oh, yeah, looking forward to it. Time, to be able to be with the kids and the grandkids, and that's always a treat.
So, I saw where you had a few things to say in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette about this car wash tax situation, about taxing the water. And I have to say, I agree with your comments. Why don't you kind of give us a rundown of where we are on this situation?
Well, we had a hearing here, I don't know, a week or so, a couple of weeks ago. I don't recall exactly how long. And, we had a guest come in from Greenwood, which is just outside of my district, up there south of Fort Smith. And he has a convenience store, which has a laundromat and has all these different apparatuses that uses water. And while the law doesn't require him to put in an additional meter just to read the car wash, if he doesn't do it and he gets audited, which he will, he's going to find himself in a bunch of trouble. Mm-hmm. And so, it's just an additional burden, and that's just part of it with the car wash and the water and all this other stuff. The other part is just, you take a look at how we tax candy. If candy has flour in it, it's considered a food or some nonsense like that. I mean, these guys can't keep up with all the different little changes and things that are in how we try to tax them. And we've made it so complicated that, really, if anybody goes in there, they will always find something wrong if they get audited. And we have to simplify that. I wasn't for, my whole position during the last session was, let's don't add a tax to the car wash. Let's take away the tax that's presently on the car wash.
Yeah.
Because they've got it divided up, with, if there's a human being involved somehow, then they get taxed. If it's just a person washing their car, then it doesn't happen. And my deal is, why bother? We're not talking about any significant amount of money. It would have very little impact, especially considering our surplus.
Yeah, what was interesting to me about that whole situation, I was there, I watched the debate. I had no idea that there were 2 different types of car washes that were taxed differently. If you're full service, then, you get that sales tax on the items. But if you're just an automated one, it's, you weren't taxed. And so then they start taxing the water, to try to compensate. And to me, I just kind of felt like, okay, so you've got a different sect of car washes trying to hurt their competitors. I mean, that's what it sounded like to me, and it seems to be that's what's happening. I mean, you got this guy now who, is very much inconvenienced by all this.
Oh, yeah, it's more than an inconvenience. I mean, his business is at risk if he doesn't figure out a way to monitor how much money is being used. Because, again, they roll in on him, with the auditors and all that, and the auditors are doing their job. There's all kinds of things that they'll be able to find wrong, and next thing, he's penalized and penalties and all this other stuff. And, we've just created a situation, in my opinion, that is almost impossible to follow. for a lot of folks out there without, creating a great deal of additional expense for them doing business.
Mm-hmm.
And, we should be going the other direction. And
we're talking
again, as we all know, I'm happy that we cut income taxes and all this other stuff, but we didn't cut spending, and so you have to pay for it one way or the other.
We're talking with state
This
representatives.
call is now being recorded.
Okay, sorry. We're talking with that wasn't on our end. I don't know what this is. Maybe that's the NSA or something.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, I think.
Arkansas State Representative Marcus Richmond. I mean, we are recording the call, but not from that. I mean, not from that mechanism. So this is what you said to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Quote, "We are pretty good at shifting tax burdens around and then taking credit for some things that appear to create perceptions of actual tax cuts." You want to elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear the fact that, you take a look at, we cut taxes on retirement pay for veterans coming back to the state.
Yep.
People that have retired and stuff, that went into effect. And that's in my opinion, it's the kind of people that we want to bring back to the state because
Yep.
It's very easy to, like me, I chose to come back here, but I'd been all over the United States. I could have lived in a lot of different places and had different jobs and stuff, but I wanted to come home. A lot of people find themselves in a financial situation where they're going to be stuck where they are, but you put that incentive in there. I mean, I have a nephew and a niece that retired from the Coast Guard, and they wanted to live in Arkansas, but they live in Tennessee instead because it's just better for them tax-wise. And so that was good to do that, to bring these folks back, but we didn't actually cut the tax. We just shifted the burden over to, and I don't recall what it was, but it was,
candy and
the
soda.
cost
I
of
think.
that was
Yeah.
paid for by somebody else.
Right.
And that, again, a real tax cut is a tax cut that's paid for by cutting spending.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, absolutely 100%. And back to this car wash bill, Marcus. I mean, this was an interesting. This is what I said about it on Monday. I feel I agree with you. You've got to. We do have to kind of change the way we're doing things. But when you have a bill that has this car wash tax in it, it has the internet sales tax in it, but then it also has a corporate tax cut. You've got this thing that's crafted that has something that's good in it. I mean, the Republican Party is going to be for cutting corporations' taxes. That's a good thing. That helps. But then you're taking money in the form of the internet sales tax, and I understand there were arguments to be made for fairness and that sort of thing, but you're basically putting, a controversial thing, a non-controversial thing, and then you throw in why couldn't we just have all three of those bills separately, or three of those issues separately? Why debate multiple tax ideas in the same piece of legislation?
Well, if you recall, Senator Stubblefield made that exact point during the discussion, and it's a valid point and something that should be done. I mean, if the bill's not good enough to stand alone, then it's not good enough to pass. And so I think they should separate these things out. We shouldn't be put in a situation where, okay, we're voting against the tax cut because we disagree with the, something else that's hung on to a really good tax cut, such as the corporate tax cut. It just puts us in a situation, and sometimes I think, some people use it as cover. There's no doubt about that. Well, I had to vote for this because, I wanted to give a tax cut. But, again, it's just not a really valid way of doing it. It's nefarious in some ways to be sure that you can get everything you want and force people to make a decision that otherwise they might not make.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems, just from somebody like me who watched this whole process, it also is hard to stop these bills once they get created. You know what I mean? I think there's a lesson to be learned here based on what these business owners in the car wash industry are going through, right? When you have a big piece of legislation like this that's debating these multiple issues that really have nothing to do with one another. I mean, for example, there's very few people that have Chapter C corporations that would benefit from the corporate tax cut, yet all of us buy stuff online, and then there's also very few of us that are car wash owners. What you end up getting are these unintended consequences because you have a piece of legislation that doesn't have anything to do with, they shouldn't be put in the same bill. And so there's an opportunity here to learn from this, but I'm not so sure how to stop kind of this. It seemed like this was the only way to get the internet sales tax passed. It seemed like there was a kind of maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Marcus, maybe more like an establishment edict saying this is the way we're going, this is where we've been told to go, and that's why the bill passed.
Well, I think, in all honesty, I think the internet sales tax would have passed on its own. I think there was enough momentum that it would have passed. It'd have been close. It would have been very close, in my opinion. But I suspect it would have passed. They didn't have to hang it on the corporate thing, but they did. And then you turn around and you put that silly car wash stuff on there. It really was. It turned it into a complete poison pill as far as I was concerned, and that's why I couldn't vote for it. And I wouldn't, but it still passed.
Yeah. Well, we're talking with State Representative Marcus Richmond. He's the majority leader in the Arkansas House of Representatives. Now, Marcus, you do have a primary opponent, which to me was, very odd. But how's the campaign going?
The campaign's going well. I think I'm doing very well. This district I have is so large. You end up really putting a lot of miles on your car trying to, campaign for it. But, the big advantage that I have is that they can see me doing my job. They can see the results of some of the legislation that's been passed and the impact that it's having out here in western Arkansas. And, again, the only thing that really bothers me about having an opponent, as majority leader, I need to be out there helping find really good candidates that could take on the other party, the Democrats, and push them out of the way and be raising money for them. But instead, I have to defend my own seat.
Yeah.
At this point, and so I'm not getting to do my job as well as I would like to do it as majority leader.
Mm-hmm.
And again, my opponent, the only thing I can say, he's undefined. We took a look. He voted in Democrat primaries right up until just a few years ago, and so it's one of those deals. He knows he can't get elected as a Democrat, so he's a Republican, running as a Republican.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. I think we have seen a lot of that. Hey, real quick, Marcus, this is a historic day, potentially. The Democrat-controlled House of Representatives in D.C. are likely going to impeach the President of the United States, Donald Trump. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's absolutely moving us towards the end of our republic even faster than our inability to control spending and all the other stuff that's wrong with Washington, D.C., that, from now on, that every time there's a president that does something, it doesn't matter what party they're in, if they do anything at all, there's going to be this partisan attack. And those Stalinists up there that belong in the Democrat Party, they don't care. They hate Donald Trump so much that they don't care if this country flips over and dies tomorrow. They absolutely want to destroy that guy, get him out of there for a couple of reasons. They can't stand him personally, and second is they can't beat him. You take a look at the Democrat primary candidates that they have. Lord have mercy. Is that the best they could do? Well, goodness, they're just terrible. Be terrible for this country if any of them got elected. So they have set us on a course that is going to be destructive to this nation and the unity of this nation from now on. Unless we can elect bigger people than politics and get people up there that are truly statesmen, I fear for our nation. I fear for our grandkids and our children and everybody. It's another step in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
They should hold full responsibility for it, and they are responsible for it. But you know what, Paul? What's sad is they don't care.
There's no question about that. And as a matter of fact, we read a large portion of the president's letter to Nancy Pelosi that he sent out yesterday. We read that last hour. That is so comprehensive and scathing and historic in and of itself. And so it's going to be a historic day, but I don't think the kind of history that is good for the country. I agree with you. And State Representative Marcus Richmond, have a Merry Christmas, sir. I appreciate your time this morning.
I appreciate you, Paul. Appreciate you all that you do for the state. Merry Christmas to you. You guys stay safe out there, okay?
All righty. We will, sir. Thank you very much. Folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to make a YouTube video of this segment. We're going to share it. Please subscribe to YouTube. Click the little bell to receive notifications. It's very simple, Conduit News. And we'll put this clip of State Representative Marcus Richmond out there as well. And you know what? We're going to be on a quest in the next, especially the turn of the new year, going to be on a quest to interview really as many folks who would like to talk about the primary races. The primaries are going to be at the very beginning of March, and early voting will start 2 weeks before that. And so the Republican primary is a big deal in these state House and Senate races because Democrats are so irrelevant in this state. They're so irrelevant they can't even properly get a U.S. senatorial candidate on the ballot. Sorry. Isn't that incredible that the Democrats are so irrelevant they can't even find somebody to challenge Tom Cotton? Oh, man. That's so funny to me. Every now and then it just kind of washes over me how funny. I mean, oh, how the mighty have fallen, you know? I mean, the Democrats used to control this state. I mean, listen, we still have some problems, you know, voting red and getting blue results. We still have that going on here, but still, we at least need to stop and take a moment and appreciate the fact that the Democrats can't get anybody on the ballot to challenge Tom Cotton. Not that they wanted to anyway. I mean, the people like Joyce Elliott and others. I mean, I know she's running for Congress. She does that when she's not up, you know, for her local race here. But nobody wanted to go all around to 75 counties to lose to Tom Cotton. That's why they found this Mahoney guy. They just thought he would be the placeholder, and then he bowed out, and now there's not a primary challenger. Anyway, it's pretty funny. All that being said, we are going to be reaching out, inviting as many folks in these primaries that want to come on this program and talk about the race and talk about really whatever you want to talk about, why they should pick you. And then, of course, the videos will be disseminated in your districts and give the people more information. That's what it's really about, isn't it? To give the voters the most information they can so that when they walk into that voting booth, they are going to make an informed decision based on their own personal beliefs and convictions, listening to what their potential legislators have to say. Coming up at 7:33, we're going to be talking with Jacob Bundrick from the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics about this audit, on whether or not this government-imposed audit, it's kind of like grading your own paper, grading your own test, as to whether or not economic incentives, corporate welfare, going to private companies works, is beneficial. Does it have the economic impact they think it does? We'll talk with Jacob Bundrick coming up at 7:33. We're going to take a break and be back here in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today,
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
That stuff about the car wash stuff is still crazy, though, right? Can we address the fact that it's just nuts to try to lower the corporate tax, raise the internet sales tax? Now, I mean, State Representative Marcus Richmond, he said he thought that the internet tax would have passed on its own. That's entirely plausible, by the way. I mean, I might say, I might disagree, but it's an arguable point. The only reason I would disagree is because they didn't do that. They lumped it in to make sure they got what they wanted. And now, he said it would have been close. Hey, I mean, here's the thing. The internet sales tax that we're now all paying because they've passed it on to us, out-of-state sellers. We're doing all this Christmas shopping. It's a lot of money coming into the government. A lot of money. More money than they want to admit. It's so much money they don't want to tell us how much it is. Think about this for a second. Hey, Joe, let me run this by you. If the state is telling us that they can't tell us how much money they're getting from the internet sales tax that they passed, that went into effect in July, that they can't tell us the number, how much more money they're getting from us, then how in the world can they police it properly if an out-of-state seller doesn't pay what they're supposed to pay? You know what I'm saying?
Well, they couldn't even police it properly to begin with because there was already one on the books that required us to remit sales tax.
The use tax. They would have had to come up to. They could have policed that. Actually, everybody would have lost power, and we would have revolted. And they could have gone. How much did you buy on the internet? They could have passed a law that required us to disclose our online purchases to the state, which would have been a blatant violation of privacy, as Dan Douglas said. Whether you shop at VictoriaSecret.com or Zappos.com, remember that one? He actually said VictoriaSecret.com. Like that's supposed to make us feel better. Like we want to know, like we want the government to know if we shop at VictoriaSecret.com. So they scrapped that bill, and then they said, no, we'll expand Arkansas sovereignty and we'll tax these out-of-state sellers. But I'm just telling you, it doesn't make any sense that they can't tell us. And they've admitted that it was a wild guess when they estimated how much money it would raise. They now say they can't tell us how much is coming in that wouldn't be coming in if they hadn't passed the law. So then my question would be, well, then how do you know if somebody's cheating us and not remitting the tax? It's an honest question. How do you know?
I always took issue with the fact that after they did go, okay, this is the estimate on how much we're going to bring in. When it got blown out of the water, I was like, this was months into it. This wasn't even a full calendar year. This was months into the whole thing. I was like, you got the wrong people working on this because they don't really know the power of the internet. Then if they undershot it this bad.
And on that bill, they disputed their own numbers. You know what I mean? Like that's the other thing. In that whole bill with the internet sales tax, the corporate tax cut, the car wash, all that. You had the guy from DFNA, Gehring, who essentially didn't want to admit that this was going to be a net tax increase on the people of Arkansas, at least in fiscal year 2020. And I didn't like when, somebody was to get to the end of the table and say, well, if you add all these numbers up, this is a lot of money coming out of it. It's a tax increase. But to Marcus Richmond's point, we haven't done anything on spending. We haven't done anything on spending. We just continue to spend more and more and more and more. And if you're going to have a tax cut, you need to actually find a way to make cuts somewhere else. And then, what happens? If it's the right kind of tax cut, people have more money in their pockets, employers hire more people, you have more taxpayers, and you actually get more money coming into the government. Which, isn't that what the left wants? We're going to be talking with Jacob Bundrick when we come back. Do not go anywhere. We also have a story, and I want to cover this before the show is over. Hang on. Where did it go? I can't help but cover this. I hear the Star Wars movie is going to be bad. I'm just saying. I've heard it's going to be bad. There's an embargo right now on reviewing the movie. But it ended, I think, last night. So maybe it's not. Anyway, I had no plans to go see the next Star Wars movie because the last one was so agenda-driven. I'm just done with it. I think it's insulting. Joe, I know you feel differently. But Mr. Driver, Kylo Ren, he has a phobia of seeing himself perform. So he walked out of an interview with NPR because they played a clip from one of his previous movies during the interview, and he walked out because he couldn't handle it.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops. For China's Christians, these are desperate times.
So, do you like him as a candidate?
I think he's brought a lot to the table. It's not my message. I worry about the party in terms of expanding our base and what the message does to our recruitment of Hispanics, outreach to minorities. And so you've got to worry about the fall election and whether this is a message that's going to carry in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, and those states that we need to carry.
The American people deserve to know. In response to the strong stand that President Trump has taken, Beijing is pursuing a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to undermine support for the president, our agenda, and our nation's most cherished ideals.
I think you've got to listen to what he says and how he conducts himself. And I don't know that he would be that different from what he is now in negotiating with Vladimir Putin. So,
you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing. We need people who, in the presidency, that understand.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Here we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is hour number 2, kind of in the home stretch here. And we want to welcome back to the program. We've got a lecturer of economics at the University of Central Arkansas. He's also affiliated researcher with the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. Jacob Bundrick is back with us. Jacob, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Paul. Good to be with you this morning.
It's always great to talk to you, sir, and I appreciate the great work you do and the great work that Acre does. I saw where you were quoted, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette reached out to you about this Arkansas legislative audit concerning whether or not incentives to big companies to get them to move to Arkansas or stay to Arkansas actually work. And you made some great points, and you seem to disagree with the findings here. What's your primary concern from this Arkansas legislative audit?
Yeah, so my primary concern is that there's some assumptions that are in the model that ALA used to do this cost-benefit analysis. And the big thing here is that one of the difficult things with analyzing these programs is determining whether these incentives actually are the deciding factor in where a company decides to locate or expand. And the assumption made by ALA is that when they offer these incentives, they assume that the company would not have located in Arkansas or expanded in Arkansas if it had not been for that incentive, right? So we're just assuming that if it weren't for that incentive, that company would not have located here, right? And that changes the cost-benefit analysis pretty dramatically, right? And we know that this assumption is invalid.
Okay, let me actually read this. This is from the ALA's cost-benefit analysis. Quote, "It's likely then that the availability of statutory incentives will cause some companies to claim incentives for projects they would have pursued even without the incentives. However, for the purposes of this report, incentives were analyzed under the assumption that without the incentive, the corresponding economic activity would not have occurred." So they're doing a report based on whether or not incentives work or not, and the assumption is they work. So I would agree with you, that is an invalid assumption. It kind of torpedoes the accuracy of the entire report, doesn't it?
Right, it does. So the cost-benefit analysis, the way they're looking at this is how many tax dollars or how much tax dollars does the state get versus how many tax dollars they issue through these incentive programs. And when you assume that company would not have located here if it had not been for that incentive, it significantly increases that benefit that the state receives. But we know this is an invalid assumption because of both anecdotal evidence and empirical evidence. So in Arkansas, we've seen companies such as Pico Foods and Bad Boy Mowers who have actually come out and said publicly that, hey, yeah, we received these incentives, but that was not the deciding factor and where we located or where we chose to expand. All right, so they're saying that this is an incentive. We receive this incentive, but it's more or less a reward for doing what we intended to do, not necessarily the driving factor in what we're doing. We've seen it in other states. For instance, there was this summer we saw Nike in Arizona, where they had some other issues going on, kind of irritated the state government out there in Arizona, and Arizona decided to pool the company's incentives. And Nike said, well, we're going to go ahead and build the plant that we were planning on building anyway. So that shows you that, hey, these incentives didn't really matter for what Nike was doing, but they're not going to say no to them because it pads their bottom line. All right, and we've seen some other empirical evidence. So there's a really nice research center up in Michigan called the W.E. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research, and they did a review of 30 empirical studies around the country, so different economists in different states looking at different programs. And they determined that for at least 75% of incented firms, the firm would have made similar location or expansion or retention decisions without the incentive. So 75% of the time that you're issuing those incentives, you don't really need to. It's not changing the company's decision. The company's already decided what they're going to do. So you're spending tax dollars needlessly to get activity that was going to happen anyway.
This flies in the face. We're talking with Arkansas Center for Research and Economics researcher Jacob Bundrick. This flies in the face of the predominant idea, which is companies must have the government giving them money in order to create jobs, and we won't be prosperous without doing this. And that's why I love your research, because this is what I've thought for a very, very long time. Also, I want to reiterate, kind of back towards you talking about the anecdotal evidence. ALA highlights a specific company in their report. Company 29 invested $1.8 million in payroll over the course of the incentive project life and received only $18,000 back in incentives. And so this goes to your point, Jacob. Do we really think they did what they did for $18,000? Did that? If you're going to spend $1.8 million to get $18,000, are we really going to say that the government's money had any impact on that at all?
It's really hard to say that's what's driving that company's decision. I think there's some speculation with that hey, this might not hold, and even ALA admits in that one might question how much the state's incentive payment actually affected the company's decision, and I think they're right to question that. I think in a lot of cases what we see is we have these statutory incentives where no matter what, if you meet certain thresholds, you qualify for this incentive, and a lot of companies are adept at understanding what incentives a state offers, and they're going to incorporate that in their decisions, just like ALA says. And it's not so much the driving factor, but if you're a company, as economists, we assume that companies are acting rationally to maximize their profits, and this is low-hanging fruit for them, right? So I don't necessarily blame the companies for doing this. They're trying to maximize their profits,
right?
But there's a problem with the institutions where we set up this environment where that's able to happen, right? So it's on the political institutions change that so that these companies aren't out there just grabbing incentives for doing what they were going to do. All right. So here's an interesting thing. I want to throw this out there real quick. I mentioned that the empirical research says that about 75% of incented firms would have made the decision that they made without those incentives. So ALA reports that from 2009 through 2018, about $684 million were awarded from specific incentive programs in Arkansas. So if you can imagine that 75% of that is not necessary to get that economic activity, right? There's an extra $500 million in Arkansas's coffers to spend on other things like roads or education or whatever it might be, police officers or public defenders, whatever that might be, right? So we're spending $500 million that's unnecessary.
I can't. Yeah, that's a great point. 75% is essentially wasted according to this data here. So, you mentioned in the Gazette article about being politically connected, that tends to be the concern, like the fact that the government continues to pursue this as like its chief economic development philosophy. It kind of means that you've got these private businesses that are, they become kind of concerned with, getting politically connected. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the concerns that economists who research this have is that it's difficult for public officials because they don't have the same profit incentive that businesses have. It's difficult for government officials to pick and choose winners and losers. All right, there's a lot of different industries out there. It's hard to know where the markets are going. They don't have the same profit incentive that if we don't get this right, we're going to go out of business. Right? We're still going to pay our taxes. There's still going to be government funding, and they can do what they want to do with it. Right? But for businesses, all right, it is do or die. It is do or die. And one of the easy, low-hanging pieces of fruit that's out there to pad that bottom line are these incentives. All right, so the motives of business and government officials are very different. And so if you're a business and you're adept at understanding what these incentives are and what these different states offer, you're able to use that to your advantage, right? And you can buddy up with public officials in order to get these incentives. And you always hear about, well, hey, it's really competitive when we're trying to get these jobs and we're trying to get these companies to locate here. It's very competitive. Well, there's a reason that it's portrayed as very competitive, right? If I pit Arkansas against Mississippi and against Texas, that means I'm using that leverage to boost up those incentive packages that I get, right? So the incentives are very different for businesses who are trying to maximize profits and politicians who are trying to get reelected and demonstrate to constituents that, hey, we're doing something to boost the economy, and this is an easy lever to pull to show that they're doing something, right? We always see these ribbon cuttings. We see these news articles. We see the news cameras go out there, right? But the incentives are very different for why politicians are doing this and why businesses are doing it.
We're talking again with Jacob Bundrick from Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. Tell me about the Invest Arkansas program, Invest ARC. Do you have any concerns with that?
Yeah, so looking through the report, one of the things that stuck out to me from ALA's report is that to determine whether Invest ARC is effective or not, ALA simply looked at whether or not the company that received the Invest ARC incentive was still operating 5 years after they received the incentive, right? So they point out that this is a unique incentive in the fact that it's a retention incentive, meaning that it's given to companies that are already in Arkansas with the hope that giving this incentive will inspire them to stay here and not leave. And so they say that it's hard to determine what the impact is. So we look at it as just, well, is the company still here 5 years later, right? That's a really difficult way or a really non-rigorous way of looking at whether this incentive actually was effective at accomplishing what it's intended to do. The one good thing I'll say about this is, even though a lot of the report focused on Invest ARC incentives and a lot of companies that have received that award, the state did go back in the last couple of years here and phase out that incentive. There was a problem with the tax code about taxing business inputs. And so the legislature actually fixed that problem in the tax code, and that got rid of the need for InvestArc. But nevertheless, we've spent over the course of the last decade or so, we've spent as a state a lot of money on this program. All right, a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars on this program. And so, determining whether or not this is effective by simply looking at whether a company who received it is still in business 5 years later is a very non-rigorous way at looking to see if this thing is actually doing what it's intended to do. So that one really concerns me.
Why is this? Let me just ask you this: do you think this is? It's very significant that state auditors are essentially saying that their government incentive packages, corporate welfare, is working. You say that it's not working the way they claim it is, and that's a big deal, right? I mean, we need to point that out, because it seems like, if you're right, Jacob, which I think you are, the government is just spinning its wheels. They're just wasting money.
Right. So I think it's really important to note here that there's a pretty large disconnect between what we see in anecdotal evidence with companies actually coming out and saying, hey, look, this didn't have any impact on our location or our expansion decisions, and what the empirical evidence says. Again, remember, 75%, on average, 75% of these incentives are unnecessary to get that economic activity that states are claiming is happening because of these incentives, right? So that is very different than what the state is claiming when they make the assumption that, hey, these incentives are the only thing that are causing the company, these companies to locate or expand here in Arkansas. That's a very large disconnect, and what that means is that the benefits that the state is attributing to these incentives is very inflated. All right, so if we are offering, hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million to a company that is going to do exactly as they plan to do, any tax revenue that we get, any jobs that are created from that, any investment that we get was already going to happen. That's not a benefit. That was going to happen anyway, right? We didn't need to give that $1 million. That $1 million is now a cost to taxpayers, right? And there's other things we could have done with that money. Like I said before, we could have, looked at addressing our road problem. We could have looked at addressing some education issues. We could have looked at 100 different problems where perhaps there's a bigger benefit. But when we inflate that cost, or that benefit, by assuming that's the driving factor in this company's decision, we're changing that investment scenario, right? And an easy way to think about it is, imagine you have two different investments to make. One for certain, you'll get 3%. For certain it's a 3% return. The other investment option is really a 0% return. You don't get anything back, but you change some numbers, you change the way you think about it, and all of a sudden you make it a 5% return. It's not a real 5% return, but your analysis makes it that way. If you invest that money in that quote-unquote 5% return when it's in fact a 0% return, you're worse off than you would have been. You could have gotten 3%, but instead you're getting 0% because you've changed how you're looking at it to an incorrect manner.
Yeah, and the government here is essentially grading their own paper, and it would be nice if we start measuring, the right outcomes, and I know that's what you've done here, Jacob, and
right.
I know I would love to see the state of Arkansas let the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics analyze this in its totality. Wouldn't you like that?
For selfish reasons, of course, right? But at the very least, I think we do have to increase the rigor that goes into these analyses, right? And there's lots of economists, not only in Arkansas, that can do this. There's lots of economists in other states that can take a look at this. And there's really some more rigorous ways to look at this to make sure that the assumptions are valid, so that we can actually see what these incentives are doing and what they're not doing, so that we can spend dollars appropriately. We can allocate our state's resources appropriately. And I think you hit on a big point there, that we have to ask ourselves if we're measuring the right outcomes, right? So this report looked primarily at how much in tax revenue do we get back when we issue these incentives. But I think it's important to keep in mind that the goal of these incentives is not to generate tax revenue, right? A lot of times these incentives are targeted at, hey, we want to stimulate job growth. or we want to stimulate investment. We want to stimulate income growth, right? We want to increase our gross state product, right? We want to lift people out of poverty. I think we have to be careful to measure those things. Are these incentives actually leading to increased activity in these arenas? And most of the empirical research to date says that they don't, right? That they don't. And I understand that's a hard thing to swallow when you have this intent. You want to help people and you see these ribbon cuttings, but we have to be very honest and very objective in our analyses of these programs so that we can allocate our scarce tax dollars in the most efficient manner to get the most bang for our buck and to really improve the quality of life here in Arkansas.
Folks, he's a lecturer of economics at the University of Central Arkansas and a affiliated research for the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, Jacob Bundrick. Jacob, I appreciate it, sir. Have a Merry Christmas.
Paul, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and visit with you. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Absolutely. Jacob, thank you. Appreciate it, sir. We're going to make a YouTube video of this. You know, one thing I'm going to add here is this research, again, you heard 75% may be just completely wasted. But I honestly, the real question that comes to my mind is if a lot of this supposed increase in incomes, increase in GDP is not actually happening, and Arkansas Center for Research and Economics has an extensive study done from like the 1980s to 2010 or something, like 14 maybe, that shows that most of this is some of it's a negative in economic impact, but most of it's just neutral. Then my question is, why the Chinese government? You know what I mean? Obviously, you got to get the higher-ups to admit that what they're doing isn't working. And, you know, it's a big deal because you're also going to have to get people like Mississippi and Texas to stop doing this as well. So there's a culture there it's a big uphill battle. But, I mean, isn't that even a larger indictment of the fact that we want to do business with the Communist Chinese? We want to have ribbon cuttings with the Communist Chinese? And it's not even working. Like the economic development itself, the idea behind it, which is why I'm opposed to it generally, doesn't work. But if you're gonna do it, don't do it to communist. Don't give the Communist Chinese our tax dollars with the hope that economic development will come. If you're gonna waste our money, don't waste it with the Chinese. Waste it with an American company. How about it? We gotta take a break. Back in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And understand how the world works, understands that there's a time for bluster and there's a time for reason.
The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or coercing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them, and they're going to help you. Guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic.
Bob Maloney here with a developing story from ASA News, The Parrot. China is coming to Arkansas. We go live to the press conference where the Communist Chinese executive is addressing Arkansans for the first time. Let's listen into the translator.
我在这里
On behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, we invite you to come and visit the newest named city in Arkansas, China, Delphia. We are very pleased to own an American city. Our communist government is proud to do business with the mediocre state of Arkansas. We are happy to take your money and your trees and send the profits back home. The Communist government of China was pleased to learn the taxpayers of Arkansas are excited to contribute their money with the hope, if you build it, one day jobs will come. We are excited to take your fields of capitalism and turn them into fields of communism, where every Arkansan has nightly dreams of Mao. China is looking forward to our investment of $1 billion in what is now called Arkansas. We see this as an investment in our future, and that future will be called New Beijing. Chinese investment will make Arkansas a great place for jobs, as the People's Republic of China will succeed where the Soviets failed. As we build our roots deep in Arkansas, we are thrilled with the potential new ideas and advancement we will share with our people back home. Soon we will have the world's largest runway in the South China Sea, and we thank Arkansas for contributing to our noble cause. In closing, once we make China great again, all of you will see the glory of the revolution of Mao. And Arkansas, whatever you do, please never call the FBI.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Welcome. All right. Historic day. They're going to impeach the President of the United States. It's going to be the fourth president ever to actually be impeached. Mitch McConnell says we're going to dismiss it. Historic day. If you have not read the President's letter to Nancy Pelosi, we read most of it for you at the top of the last hour, the first hour of the program. You can get that podcast or conduitnews.com, facebook.com, YouTube. It's incredible. President Trump, in a historic letter of his own, sets the record straight, and it's absolutely incredible what he lays out, the journey that we've been on, really the nightmare the country's been on for 3 years, because people just don't want to accept that the American people didn't want Hillary Clinton as their president. They wanted Donald Trump as their president. So it's going to be a big day today. I'm telling you right now, once again, I want to reiterate, this is just my personal opinion, but it's an opinion based on what I have seen over the last 3 years. Every time the media, the deep state, the Democrats, even people in his own party set traps for President Donald Trump, they fall into their own traps. They fall into their own nets, if you will. For more on that, go read Psalm chapter 35. Read the whole psalm. You'll understand what I'm talking about. I'm just telling you, it is obvious to me that that's what's been going on, so I have no reason to doubt that's not what's going to continue to happen here. A lot more stuff is going to be exposed from a lot of the people that we've thought were fine leaders for a very, very long time. Here's your meme of the day, courtesy of _courageous_conservative on Instagram. Only someone stupid would fall for that. Bunch of fish in the ocean. There's a sign on a hook that reads socialism. And then there's a fish that's labeled college students. And the college students just hook, line, and sinker, baby. I want that socialism, and we'll post it up for you, for those of you who are listening. But you guys see, I mean, this is but a taste of what the Marxists would behold for us. It's also Lord of the Rings season at my house. We'll end the show now, and you guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. I want to thank Jacob Bundrick. I want to thank State Representative Marcus Richmond. Arkansas, be safe.